6:47 p.m., rural Arkansas. The kitchen smelled of hot grease and dish soap, the ceiling fan chopping the humid air into uneven pieces. "You're useless. You don't do anything." Kayla's voice cracked against the cabinets, sharp enough to sting. A spoon rattled in the sink. The clock over the doorway kept ticking, loud in the pause that followed. I stood near the counter, hands folded the way I'd learned to fold them when words wouldn't help. My husband froze at the table, eyes on the grain of the wood. So this is how it sounds out loud, I thought. Not anger exactly, but certainty. Certainty dressed up as frustration. Kayla paced, bare feet slapping the tile. "We carry everything," she said, breath quick. "Bills, plans, responsibility. You just—" She stopped herself, then finished anyway. "You're in the way." The room felt smaller. The fan clicked once, missed a beat, then kept going. I noticed the thin crack in the window frame where winter air always found its way in. I noticed how my hands didn't shake. "I don't argue when someone is already decided," I said quietly. She didn't hear me or chose not to. Silence can be mistaken for surrender if people need it to be. I turned toward the pantry. The cabinet door creaked the way it always had. Behind the flour tin and the extra jars, an old folder waited, edges softened by years. Not yet, I told myself. Timing matters. Kayla's voice kept going behind me, words stacking where my consent should have been. I rested my palm against the folder, feeling its weight through the wood paper, thick and patient. All right, I thought. Now I know where this begins. I closed the cabinet gently and faced the room again, calm settling in place. 7:12 p.m., rural Arkansas. The argument burned itself out the way storms do here, loud at first, then suddenly gone. Kayla slammed the back door and the screen rattled in its frame. The house exhaled. Cicadas picked up where shouting had left off, their steady rhythm filling the space words had torn open. My husband still hadn't moved. He stared at the table, one hand wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, knuckles pale. I wiped the counter slowly, even though it was already clean. Habit steadies the hands. The grease smell faded, replaced by the familiar scent of pine cleaner and old wood. This house had held worse than raised voices. It had learned patience long before I did. "Useless," I repeated silently, not to wound myself, but to examine it. People don't choose that word by accident. They use it when they've already decided someone's value has expired. I sat down across from my husband. "You hungry?" I asked. My voice sounded like it always did, calm, ordinary. He shook his head without looking up. The ceiling fan clicked again, steady now. Outside, the sky darkened into that deep Arkansas blue that comes before night settles fully. I watched it through the window, letting the quiet do its work. I wasn't angry. Anger burns too much energy. What I felt instead was alignment pieces clicking into place after years of small misreadings. They think I'm still here because I have nowhere else to be, I realized. They think staying means depending. I stood and reached for my bag by the chair. Inside, beneath a folded sweater, was my notebook, the one with dates, account numbers, notes written small and neat. I didn't open it yet. I just felt its presence, solid and familiar. This wasn't the moment to speak. It was the moment to remember exactly who I'd been, long before anyone decided who I was allowed to be. 5:04 a.m., northern Arkansas. Morning used to arrive before anyone else noticed. Long before raised voices and slammed doors, my days began quietly, coffee on the stove, ledger on the table, the house still half asleep. I married young and learned early that stability isn't something you feel. It's something you build, line by line, even when no one is watching. My husband worked with his hands. I worked with numbers. While he fixed fences and engines, I tracked payments, taxes, and deeds. We bought land people didn't want, awkward parcels, forgotten corners, places that required patience instead of praise. Arkansas has plenty of those. They don't look like much at first, but they hold if you treat them right. We paid early. We kept copies. We asked questions others skipped because they sounded tedious. I learned to read contracts the way my mother taught me to read, whether slowly, paying attention to what wasn't being said. That habit saved us more times than luck ever did. When money was tight, we tightened quietly. No announcements, no complaints. When things improved, we didn't change much. Same table, same routines, same calm answers when people asked how we were doing. Modesty has a way of confusing people who think noise equals progress. As years passed, titles accumulated, accounts layered, small decisions stacked into something solid. I handled renewals, transfers, and filings the way other people handled gossip, regularly and without drama. It wasn't power I wanted. It was continuity. By the time our children were grown, most of what mattered was already settled, recorded, protected, and paid for. No one applauded that kind of work. They rarely do. But silence doesn't mean absence. It means the foundation is already there, waiting for someone to notice what's been holding everything up all along. 10:22 a.m., rural Arkansas. Confidence entered the house before respect did. Kayla came into my life brisk and certain, like she'd already measured the rooms before learning their names. She spoke fast, laughed loud, and moved through the kitchen as if it were temporary something to be rearranged once real decisions were made. At first, I mistook that for youth. I've learned not to confuse momentum with care. She asked questions that sounded polite but landed like conclusions. "Do you still keep track of all this?" she'd say, glancing at the mail without opening it. Or, "Isn't it easier if someone else handles things now?" Her smile stayed fixed, waiting for agreement to catch up. The red flags were small. She summarized instead of listening, touched papers she hadn't read, used words like streamline and simplify when she meant replace. When I answered slowly, she filled the space with her own certainty, as if quiet unsettled her. Once, while I balanced the checkbook at the table, she leaned over my shoulder. "You don't have to worry about this anymore," she said, reaching for the pen. I closed the book gently and moved it aside. "I've got it," I replied. She laughed, light and dismissive. "For now," she said. "For now is how control begins." She spoke often about burden, how responsibilities pile up, how aging complicates things, always in general terms, never with my name attached. Not yet. I watched how she checked with others before checking with me, how decisions were floated as favors already granted. She's deciding who I am before asking what I've done, I thought. I didn't correct her. Silence can be a mirror if you hold it long enough. People reveal what they assume when they think they're already in charge. and Kayla assumed plenty. 1:47 p.m., rural Arkansas. The first betrayal arrived dressed as help. It started with small rearrangements. Mail placed in new piles. Papers shifted from where I kept them. Kayla moved through the kitchen with purpose, humming lightly, as if order were something she brought with her rather than something that had existed long before. "I'm just trying to make things easier," she said, sliding a stack of envelopes into a drawer I didn't use. I thanked her. Courtesy has a way of smoothing over edges you should be feeling. That afternoon, I noticed a utility notice missing from the counter. I asked about it casually. "Oh, I handled that," Kayla replied, already turning away. "You don't need to worry about bills anymore." The words landed gently, but they carried a quiet weight. Handled how? I wondered. When I asked to see the statement, she hesitated, just a moment too long, then smiled. "It's all taken care of," she said. "Trust me." Trust, offered before explanation, is rarely generous. Later, a confirmation email printed and folded appeared on the table. Paid. On time. From my account. The amount was right. The authorization was not. I traced the date with my finger, feeling the calm click into place. Access had moved, not asked for, assumed. "You logged into my account?" I asked that evening, keeping my voice even. Kayla shrugged, unbothered. "We're family," she said. "It's easier this way." Easier for whom went unanswered. I stood at the sink, warm water running over my hands, and watched the window darken toward evening. My pulse stayed steady. What I felt wasn't anger, it was recognition. The first betrayal isn't loud, it's convenient. This is how authority slips, I thought, quietly, with a smile. I dried my hands and said nothing more. There would be time for clarity, just not yet. 3:12 p.m., rural Arkansas. The second betrayal arrived as exclusion. It showed up in conversations I wasn't part of. I'd walk into the kitchen and voices would lower, then lift again once I passed. Decisions had already been shaped by the time I heard about them, summaries offered instead of questions. "We talked it through," Kayla would say. "It's better this way." Better, I noticed, meant without me. Mail began arriving opened, not torn, neatly slit, stacked and sorted. "Just the important ones," she explained, tapping the pile as if importance were her to decide. When I asked for originals, she waved a hand. "I'll keep track. You don't need the clutter." Clutter is what people call records when records threaten comfort. One afternoon, the bank called to confirm a change. The voice on the line was polite, practiced. "Your representative approved the update," she said. Representative. The word felt foreign in my mouth. "I didn't approve anything," I replied. There was a pause, then reassurance. "It's already processed." That evening, I asked Kayla for a list of what she'd changed. She smiled like I'd asked something quaint. "Don't stress yourself," she said softly. "I'm handling it." Handling it meant deciding what I could see. I opened my old notebook after supper, the one with dates and names written in my own hand. Everything I'd paid, everything I still controlled. I compared it to the new summaries she'd left behind. Lines didn't match. Timing didn't either. This isn't help anymore, I thought. It's replacement. I felt no rush to confront her. Silence steadies the room when people expect noise. Instead, I gathered what mattered: statements, receipts, deeds I'd kept tucked away for years. I aligned their edges and returned them to the cabinet behind the jars of flour. Authority doesn't disappear at once. It's edited out piece by piece until you're expected not to notice. I noticed. 6:27 p.m., rural Arkansas. The third betrayal crossed the line. It happened at the kitchen table, the one with the shallow burn mark near the edge. Supper had gone quiet, plates cooling where they sat. Kayla placed a single page between us, smoothing it flat with her palm. "This will make things simpler," she said. "We just need your signature." I read the header first. Authority transfer. My name typed cleanly beneath language I hadn't agreed to. "You won't have to worry any more," she added, already reaching for a pen. "It's a lot for you to manage." A lot. The word pressed where patience used to sit. "I didn't ask for this," I said. She sighed, practiced and tired. "Clara, be realistic. You don't do anything anymore." Then sharper, louder so it would land. "You're useless." The room went still. Even the clock hesitated between ticks. I felt the folder in the cabinet behind me. The familiar weight of years kept tidy. So this is how it's named, I thought. Not concern, control. "I pay the taxes," I said quietly. "The insurance, the utilities." "That's not the point," she replied. "Just sign." I didn't reach for the pen. I stood instead and opened the cabinet. The old folders slid out smooth as memory deeds, receipts, statements aligned the way I'd left them. I set it on the table and closed it again without opening. "Not yet." "No," I said. One word. Enough. Kayla's smile thinned. "You're making this difficult." I met her eyes, calm as settled dust. "I'm making it correct." I gathered the folder and held it to my chest, feeling its steady square. This wasn't anger rising. It was clarity finishing its thought. Whatever she believed she'd taken, she'd misjudged. Because what I'd built wasn't on that page. And I was done being erased at my own table. 8:03 p.m., rural Arkansas. After the noise leaves. The house sounded different once the argument burned itself out. Not quieter, just hollowed. Kayla moved through the rooms with quick, purposeful steps, cabinets closing a little too hard, water running longer than needed. My son said nothing. He hadn't all evening. Silence can come from many places, I've learned. Not all of them are peaceful. I carried the folder back to my room and set it on the dresser. The lamp cast a soft yellow circle across the bedspread, familiar and steady. Outside, cicadas stitched the dark together, their rhythm unbothered by raised voices or wounded pride. I sat down and rested my hands on my knees, breathing slow until my shoulders dropped. All right, I thought, now I know where we stand. I opened the folder not to prove anything, not yet, but to confirm order. Deeds, tax receipts, insurance policies. The handwriting I recognized as my own from years ago, firm and careful. Everything was where it should be. Prepared doesn't mean dramatic. It means ready. In the hallway, footsteps passed, then faded. A door closed. Life resumed its ordinary sounds as if nothing had shifted, but something had. Authority doesn't disappear in an instant. It waits to see who notices when it's taken. I took out a small notebook and wrote 3 words on a clean page. Confirm ownership status. No exclamation, no emotion, just direction. I placed the folder back inside my bag and zipped it closed, the sound soft but final. Tomorrow wouldn't require raised voices or explanations. It would require accuracy, dates, signatures, things I trusted. I lay back and stared at the ceiling fan turning slow and steady. The insult replayed once, then lost its edge. Useless wasn't what I was. Invisible was what they'd mistaken me for, and invisibility, used wisely, has its advantages. 6:27 a.m., rural Arkansas. Preparation begins before the house wakes. Morning came in thin and pale through the kitchen window. I made coffee quietly, the kind of quiet that doesn't tiptoe. It knows where it belongs. The house slept on. I set my bag on the table and opened it with care, laying things out in the order I trusted. The folder, the notebook, my reading glasses. I didn't rush. Dates first, then names, then lines that mattered. Deeds recorded decades ago, property taxes paid early every year, insurance kept current without reminders. I traced one margin with my finger, feeling the groove where paper had been pressed flat too many times to count. Accuracy lasts, I reminded myself. Tone doesn't. I wrote a short list: assessor's office, county clerk, title confirmation. Nothing dramatic, just steps. The kettle clicked off. Steam rose and faded. I sipped and kept reading. When I dialed the county number, my voice stayed even. "I'm calling to confirm records," I said. No story attached, no defense offered. Silence on the line turned into attention. "Yes," the woman replied after a pause. "We can verify that today." I thanked her and hung up. Outside, a truck passed on the road, gravel popping once and then settling. I folded the notebook closed and slipped it beside the folder. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked, someone shifting in sleep. I didn't look up. Preparation doesn't announce itself to people who aren't listening. I stood, smoothed the table without needing to, and zipped the bag. The sound felt decisive. Today wasn't about confrontation. It was about confirming what had always been true. As I reached for my keys, a thought settled cleanly and calm. When people take control by shouting, the answer is paper. And paper, if it's in order, speaks louder than any room ever could. 1:42 p.m., County Clerk's Office, Arkansas. The turn waits for timing. The office smelled like paper and old varnish, the kind of place where voices lower on their own. A ceiling fan pushed warm air in a patient circle. I sat with my bag on my lap, posture easy, eyes steady on the counter where files changed hands without ceremony. When my name was called, I stood and followed the clerk to a side desk. She laid out copies with careful alignment, deeds, parcel maps, tax histories. Each page carried a date that didn't rush me. This is how truth looks, I thought, plain, recorded. She pointed once. "These properties," she said, neutral and precise, "are all titled to you. No liens, no shared authority." Another page slid forward. "This one, too, updated 3 years ago." I nodded. No reaction to manage. The work had already been done years before anyone raised their voice in my kitchen. My phone vibrated softly. A message from home. "We need to talk. Now." I didn't open it. Timing matters. The clerk stamped the last page and handed me a receipt. The stamp sounded final, a small thud that landed exactly where it should. I thanked her and gathered the papers into my folder, the edges neat and unbothered. Outside, the sun sat high, heat pressing down without apology. I paused by my car and took one breath longer than necessary. Not yet, I told myself. Let the room be ready. As I drove back, I rehearsed nothing. Records don't need rehearsal. They need to be read. When I pulled into the driveway, voices carried through the open kitchen window, tight, impatient. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment listening. Someone laughed sharply. Someone said my name. I picked up my bag and stepped out. The door waited. Inside, the room was already arranged for decisions that weren't theirs to make. 3:09 p.m., kitchen table, Arkansas, when the record is read. The kitchen felt smaller than it had that morning. Afternoon light slanted across the counter, catching dust in the air like it wanted to be noticed. Kayla stood near the sink, arms folded, impatience already shaped into her posture. My son hovered by the doorway, quiet, uncertain. I set my bag on the table and sat. "I talked to someone," Kayla began, voice tight. "This needs to be settled." She tapped the counter as if speed could decide ownership. I opened the folder without looking at her. Paper against wood made a soft sound, ordinary, final. I slid the first page forward, then the second, aligning corners the way I always had. "Before we decide anything," I said calmly, "these should be read." Kayla laughed once. "Those old papers don't—" "They do," I replied, and nodded toward my son. He picked up the top page, eyes scanning faster than his breathing. His brow furrowed. He turned the page, then another. "What is this?" he asked, quieter now. "Deeds," I said, "recorded, paid, updated." Kayla stepped closer, reaching. I didn't stop her. She read the headings, then the names. Mine. Again. And again. Her voice thinned. "This can't be right." "It is," I said. "The house, the pasture, the rental on Pine Road, all titled to me." The room shifted. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a truck passed. Kayla's shoulders dropped a fraction, certainty draining away. "You never said—" "I was never asked," I answered. My son set the papers down, careful now. "Mom, you've been paying everything?" "For years," I said, quietly. No one spoke. Paper doesn't argue. It concludes. I closed the folder and rested my hands on it. The truth stood without raising its voice. Kayla looked at the table, then at me. For the first time she didn't speak. And in that silence, the balance returned to where it had always belonged. 4:02 p.m., front porch, Arkansas, when the truth leaves the kitchen. The porch boards were warm underfoot, the late afternoon sun settling into everything without asking permission. Kayla stepped outside first, phone already in her hand, breath quick and uneven. My son followed, stopping halfway down the steps, like he wasn't sure which direction belonged to him anymore. I came last and closed the screen door gently behind me. "This isn't fair," Kayla said, turning back toward me. Her voice carried now louder than it had been inside. "You should have told us. You let us think." "I let you assume," I said, calm. The words didn't rush. They didn't need to. "Those aren't the same thing." She looked past me, as if the neighbors might side with volume. A curtain moved across the street. A car slowed, then passed. Public spaces have a way of clarifying tone. Kayla lowered her voice. "So what now?" she asked. "What was always the case," I replied. "Nothing changes without my consent." My son spoke then, finally stepping onto the porch. "Kayla," he said quietly, "Mom owns it, all of it." He looked at me, eyes searching for something he hadn't seen before. "She always did." Kayla's jaw tightened. You let me look foolish, she said. I didn't raise my voice, I answered. You did. The breeze lifted the edge of the old folder tucked under my arm, papers inside secure and silent. I held it closer, not defensively, just out of habit. We can talk about boundaries, I continued. Respect what happens next, but it won't be decided by shouting. For a moment, Kayla said nothing. The porch creaked as she shifted her weight. Then she nodded once, sharp and reluctant. Fine, she said. We'll figure it out. We will, I agreed. Correctly. The sun dipped lower, gilding the yard I'd paid for year after year. Neighbors went back to their business. The moment didn't need an audience anymore. I turned back toward the house, knowing something had changed. Not because I demanded it, but because the truth had been seen. And once seen, it doesn't unsee itself. 6:19 p.m., living room, Arkansas, when authority quietly changes hands. The house filled again without ceremony, not a meeting, just people moving where they now understood the center to be. Chairs angled toward me without instruction, voices softened. Someone asked if I wanted tea. I nodded once. Kayla hovered near the doorway, phone dark in her hand. No more pacing, no more raised voice. When she spoke, it was to my son, not over him. That was new. We'll need to adjust, she said carefully. Schedules, decisions. The word we sounded different now, tentative, checked. A neighbor stopped by with mail that had been misdelivered before. Thought this belonged with you, she said, placing it in my hands directly. Not on the counter, not passed along, directly. Small things tell the truth faster than speeches. Kayla tried once more to gather the room. I was just trying to help, she said, half laughing. The sound didn't travel. No one filled the silence for her. My son cleared his throat. Help starts with asking, he said. He didn't look at me for approval. He didn't need to. Paper did the rest. A simple note appeared on the fridge utilities to remain unchanged. Another on the calendar, property review by appointment only. No drama, just order reasserting itself. Kayla gathered her things early, not angrily, carefully. Before leaving, she paused. I didn't know, she said. I know, I replied. That's the difference. The door closed. The house breathed. Conversations resumed with a new alignment, questions addressed to me, answers respected without commentary. Downfalls aren't always loud. Sometimes they arrive as a room that no longer turns toward you. That evening, as the light softened across the floor, I felt no triumph, only balance returning to where it had always belonged. 8:02 p.m., back porch, Arkansas, when the body finally lets go. The house grew quiet in layers, not the sharp quiet that follows an argument, but the softer kind that settles when nothing is left to prove. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled my sweater tighter, feeling the cool air move across my wrists. Crickets had started up again, steady and unconcerned. I sat in the old chair by the railing, the one my husband fixed years ago when a leg wobbled. He never replaced things unless they asked for it. Neither did I thought. The porch light hummed faintly above me, casting a warm circle that didn't reach the yard. That felt right enough light to rest, not to perform. Only then did I notice how tired I was. Not the heavy exhaustion of work, but the deeper kind that comes from holding yourself steady for too long. I rested my hands in my lap and let my shoulders drop. My breath slowed without instruction. Inside, I could hear the soft sounds of dishes being set away, careful and quiet. No one rushed. No one filled the space with apologies or explanations. Respect doesn't announce itself, it adjusts its volume. I thought about the word useless, how easily it had been thrown, how little it had known me. I had built a life where usefulness wasn't loud. It was reliable. It showed up every month, every year, every winter that needed planning ahead. That truth didn't need defending anymore. I closed my eyes for a moment and let memory pass without stopping it. Then I opened them and looked out at the dark yard, familiar and unchanged. Healing, I realized, isn't applause. It's the quiet permission to rest in your own place again without bracing. And tonight, that was enough. 6:09 a.m., Arkansas. Morning doesn't wait for permission. Dawn arrived the way it always had, quiet, steady, unapologetic. Pale light slipped through the kitchen window and settled on the table, where everything had been argued, proven, and finally understood. I made coffee and listened to the house wake, pipes warming, floorboards easing, the familiar rhythm of a place that knew me. Nothing looked different, and yet everything was. I carried my mug to the window and watched the yard come into focus. The fence line, the trees, the stretch of land that had held more of my life than most people realized. Ownership isn't just paper, I thought. It's history. It's care repeated so often it becomes invisible. For years I had let silence protect me, not because I was afraid to speak, but because I knew when words would be wasted. Quiet isn't weakness, it's discernment. It's knowing that truth lasts longer when it doesn't have to shout. I thought about how easily people confuse age with absence, calm with compliance, how quickly they decide what someone is worth based on convenience. I had learned slowly, deliberately, that you don't correct every assumption. Some are better left to collapse on their own. I rinsed my cup and set it upside down on the towel. Outside, a bird called once and flew off. Life moved forward, unconcerned with yesterday's judgments. I liked that. Before leaving the kitchen, I paused and rested my hand on the table, grounding myself in its solid edge. Here is what I know now, and what I will carry quietly with me. Never let anyone decide your value by how little noise you make. Never trade your peace for their comfort. Some power doesn't announce itself. It stands patiently until the world adjusts around it, and it always does.